I promised a friend of mine that before I gave the sermon, I would give thanks for her uncles Tony and Richie, who were with her when she needed them. When I was a child and on into middle age, I spent much blessed time with my grandparents, my father's parents, who lived on a farm in North Louisiana with cows, chickens, and one horse, Graybuck, who plowed my grandmother's garden every spring. My grandfather was disabled during World War I, so there was no major farming going on during my lifetime. I remember that the house had an open hallway down the middle, with 2 bedrooms, a dining room and kitchen on the left, and with the living room, bathroom, and bedroom on the right. Apparently, before I was born, there was an outhouse, but thankfully the bathroom had been installed before I came along in 1953. When I was young, my grandmother, Lula, got up in the dark to milk cows. Then she made breakfast biscuits every morning with the flour from a giant bin that tilted out next to the sink, and cane syrup in what looked like a paint can made by a local man who had a mule to help squeeze juice from the sugar cane. I'm sorry, my grandfather would be offended. Syrup. Where did syrup come from? After milking, in spring and summer, she picked fresh, wonderful stuff from her garden. Green beans, butter beans, new potatoes, corn, various greens, turnip, mustard, and collard. Cucumbers she made into pickles, and other amazing things that have never tasted the same since. She cooked dinner every weekday early. Now, not lunch, but dinner. And dinner was supper. You understand? Yeah, okay. She always corrected me if I referred to lunch. That's why I had to harp on that just a little bit. Whatever you call that meal in the middle of the day, we ate early enough to finish clearing up and washing the dishes by noon so we could gather in front of the living room TV to watch her story, As the World Turns. She was often so tired that she fell asleep and then asked me afterward to tell her what happened. And I paid close attention so I could tell her every detail. I doubt I truly understood the immorality I was watching and repeating. Lots of family trauma and adultery and fornication and such. I listened to stories in Sunday school too, and looking back, I realized certain stories were not part of our spiritual instruction. There were things that could not be illustrated on a flannel board for elementary school children. Several years ago, a friend loaned me a fascinating book entitled The Harlot by the Side of the Road, with the subtitle, Forbidden Tales of the Bible. Excerpts from Amazon's description. The stories you are about to read are some of the most violent and sexually explicit in all of Western literature. They are tales of human passion in all of its infinite variety: adultery, seduction, incest, rape, mutilation, assassination, torture, sacrifice, and murder. The author of the book, Jonathan Kirsch, contextualizes the stories in their time, both politically and socially, along with a survey of biblical scholarship over time, showing, quote, how these ancient narratives hold valuable lessons for all of us. I am not sure what lessons I was supposed to learn from my grandmother's soap opera, but we must acknowledge the complexities often embedded in the Old Testament stories that appear to include similar sleazy narratives. Today's Old Testament reading is one of those narratives. In Genesis 11, we are introduced to Abram and his wife Sarai, who was barren. In chapter 12, God speaks to Abram, telling him to go to the land that I will show you, and that God will make of him a great nation. Later in that same chapter, God appears to Abram, telling him, to your offspring I will give this land. No reason is given for Abram's being chosen by God. In fact, in the same chapter, Abram proves his unworthiness of God's promises. In Egypt, he and Sarai lie to the Pharaoh, saying she is Abram's sister, not his wife. She was, and I love the delicate way this is put, taken into Pharaoh's house. In exchange for livestock and male and female slaves, probably the Egyptian slave Hagar among them. In chapter 15, God appears to Abram in a vision, reassuring him of his coming reward. But Abram responds by whining about having no offspring, and God, once again, makes a covenant about his descendants inheriting the land. Immediately follows the soapiest part of this story. Sarai, still barren, tells Abram to circumvent God's promise, a promise she no longer believes, to use their own devices to provide an heir. And she tells her husband, "Take my Egyptian slave girl Hagar so we can get children by her." He says, "Okay." And Sarai gives him Hagar as a wife. Nothing is mentioned about her willingness in this scheme or her feelings. I read it as a rape. When Hagar conceived, we are told that, quote, she looked with contempt on her mistress. My assumption is that she felt safer as a slave bearing her master's child. After all, she was merely property otherwise. Abram, apparently henpecked by his shrewish wife, responds to Sarai's complaint. This is Abram speaking to his wife. "Your slave girl is in your power. Do to her as you please." So Sarai, quote, dealt harshly with her, and she ran away from her. That "dealt harshly with" is a phrase that no doubt covers numberless atrocities. Having taught literature of the American South for years, I find this a familiar, horrific tale until what follows. Alone by a spring in the wilderness, she has an experience similar to Abram's. The Lord finds her, appears to her, and speaks to her. First, oddly, the Lord tells her to go back and submit to Sarai. But he adds that in a similar vein to the promise to Abram, "I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude." He has, quote, given heed to your affliction. And she, quote, named the Lord who spoke to her. "You are El Roi," which translates as the God of seeing, for she has seen God and remained alive. There is then a quick cut. She bore Abram, who is 86, a son, whom he names Ishmael. Soap operas take a long time to unfold, yet we are skipping ahead a whole verse, one verse, to when Abram is 99. And God appears to him again, reaffirming his covenant that he will be the ancestor of a multitude of nations, and renaming him Abraham and his wife Sarah, who shall finally have a son. But what about Ishmael, who will have multiple offspring and be the father of nations? He is not going to be the son of the covenant, and he is still a slave, as is his mother, because that son will be Isaac, the son of Abraham and Sarah. Skipping ahead to the reappearance of Hagar in chapter 21, which was today's reading. When Isaac and Ishmael had grown to an age when Sarah became jealous of Ishmael. For some inexplicable reason, God tells Abraham to obey Sarah's demand to, quote, cast out this slave woman with her son. So Abraham sends Hagar and Ishmael into the wilderness with only a skin of water. Once again, the Lord intervenes as she waits, weeping for her child to die, and tells her not to be afraid, that he has heard her and the boy. After reiterating his promise to make a great nation of Ishmael, he opens her eyes to a well of water from which she and her son drink. Here is the message I want to take from this story. God was with the boy. The word that is most significant here is with. I need to make a couple of comments. The rest of the sermon actually comes from Sam Wells, a priest whose message entitled God is With Us was part of Year 4's assignment in EFM this spring. And I'm not using quotation marks to differentiate his words from mine, so forgive me for a lot of plagiarism, and consider this a recruitment for EFM. I'm an English teacher of decades, and the fact that I'm saying, yeah, I'm plagiarizing really bothers me. By the way, it's not all just, I don't even know how to explain it. Okay, let's put it this way. His sermon is 30 minutes long. This won't be. So I have sort of, picked and chosen and woven together, hopefully well enough to make sense. All right. Sam Wells sets up an opposition of the words for and with. We as Christians want to do for people, trying to make things better, to lay ourselves down for others to walk over us, selflessness. But Wells insists that for is not the way God relates to us. For is not the heart of God. The announcement of Christ's birth specifies that he shall be called Emmanuel. God is with us. While for is a word that sums up the positive public face of Christianity, being generous, kind, sacrificial, noble, good, warm-hearted. It doesn't get to the heart of the problem. For doesn't dismantle resentment or overcome misunderstanding or deal with alienation or isolation. Wells, again, God doesn't simply set the world straight for us, doesn't simply shower us with good things, doesn't mount up blessings upon us. We would love for God to make us happy and surround us with perfect things. Instead, God speaks a different word, with. A word that is at the heart of the Christian faith, that is the most fundamental thing about God. Before anything else, there was a with. John's gospel begins, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. Wells sees God and the Word in this passage as the Father and the Son, who are only completely divine when they are together. In Matthew, Jesus' last words to his disciples and beyond them to us are, "Behold, I am with you always." From Revelation, "Behold, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them." Wells declares with, the word with, as the most important word in the Bible, a word that describes the heart of God and the nature of God's purpose and destiny for us. He says, and I am quoting, "That's what God was in the very beginning. That's what God sought to instill in the creation of all things. That's what God was looking for in making a covenant with Israel. That's what God's coming in Jesus was all about. That's what the sending of the Holy Spirit meant. That's what our destiny and the company of God will look like. God's whole life and action and purpose are shaped to be with us." What does with mean in our daily lives as Christians? In a lot of ways, with is harder than for. This is Wells. You can do for without a conversation, without a real relationship, without a genuine shaping of your life to accommodate and incorporate the other. For cannot make up for the lack of that with. But we fear the with because it seems to ask more of us than we can give. We would all prefer to keep charity on the level of for, where it can't hurt us. We are to be with, even when there's nothing we can do for those in poverty, distress, or grief. We can be with people in grief and loss, even when there's nothing to say, and there rarely are words. Wells, in an appraisal of all our relationships, we should ask ourselves, does my working for arise out of a fundamental commitment to be with? Or is my working for driven by my profound desire to avoid the discomfort, the challenge, the patience, the loss of control involved in being with? He goes on, most of the time we just want God to fix it and spare us the relationship, but that's not God's way. God could have done it all alone, but God chose not to. God chose to do it with us, even though it cost the cross. The cross is usually portrayed as the ultimate moment of for, the definitive thing only God could do, that God did do on our behalf. According to Wells, in fact, the cross is Jesus' ultimate demonstration of being with us. In the moment of his death, neither we nor the Father are with him. Recall his words, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus experiences the fundamental reality of sin, living without God, suffering, being without comfort, death, being without all things, without breath, without connectedness, without consciousness, without a body. Jesus gives everything he is, being with the Father, for the cause of being with us. And the Father chooses letting the Son be with us rather than keeping the Son to himself. If we are Abraham, Sarai, Sarah, Hagar, Ishmael, or Isaac, whether we are dying in the wilderness without water, whether we feel alone in life or in the hour of our death, whether we are blessed beyond measure, whatever our situation or the condition of our soul, God is with us. I will conclude with some scripture. This is quoted from the Bible. Isaiah 41. "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Joshua 1. "Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." The 23rd Psalm. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Matthew 28. "And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." Deuteronomy 31. "It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed." Hebrews 13. "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Psalm 139. "Where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence?" And to quote our liturgy, "The Lord be with you.